Hello, I am Noa Cykman, Master in Political Sociology from the Federal University of Santa Catarina, Brazil. It's a pleasure to participate in this very special conference. My talk is entitled Hot Potato, Hot Potato, Hot Potato Planet, Gains a Non-Formal Education for Teaching Climate Justice. I will speak about games as pedagogical tools for ecological education, starting with criticism of traditional educational system and its modern foundations, then looking into alternatives, and finally giving examples of concrete activities. The game's descriptions will serve to illustrate the present analysis and hopefully as inspiration for the creation and proliferation of more of the kind. The educational model applied in most schools in the West has inherited the pedagogical lineage woven by the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment at the service of the ideals of modernity and the capitalist system. The school is oriented toward the production of economically useful and politically submissive subjectivities in order to fill the market's demand for jobs and to carry out these jobs mechanically. Such docile bodies, in Michel Foucault's nomenclature, are the expected result of traditional schooling. The formula has been repeated for centuries. Ordered students within classrooms and across age levels, professorial authority, hierarchy, obedience, discipline, transmission of contents, rational sovereignty. Knowledge is dissected in different disciplines with few established connections and imposed on students in a technical, rational manner independently of their interest. At the heart of this pedagogy is the modern motto, to achieve emancipation through the control and regularization of phenomena. Modern science, the homeland of school knowledge, is directed to such goals. It aims at unveiling the world in order to bend it to human interests. Progress consists in taming nature through technique, the savage through reason, the woman through man, primitive people through European values. The valorization of the categorical and technical control of the world is opposed to nature, intuition, magic, poetry, dreaming, myth, emotional obstructions. For modern science, to know is to reduce subjectivity virtually to zero in order to achieve the pure object, and pure objects are considered to be individual units that result from the systematic decomposition of assemblages. Contemporary education descends from this tradition, without having established with it any substantial rupture. The fragmentary, objectivist and disciplinary approach manifests itself both in the treatment of knowledge and in the treatment of students. Formatted by the modern paradigm, conventional education privileges separation at the expense of connection, mechanics at the expense of affection, thinking over feeling, seriousness or its theater, rather than fun. It numbs the pupil's ability to see and establish connections, stifles creativity and taste, and ignores or minimizes sensitivity. Both knowledge and students should fit into square shapes. Curves must be rectified. Nature must be disciplined. Edgar Morin, theorist of the complex thought, says, effectively, the intelligence that only knows how to separate fragments the complex world into separate pieces, fractures the problems, unidimensionalizes the multidimensional. Its insufficiency in dealing with our most serious problems is one of the most serious problems we face. End of quote. Education, in order to educate, must deal with knowledge as integrated elements that share the same world of which we are part, and not as isolated fragments of an abstract and alien reality. Likewise, learners cannot be disintegrated. Even the cleanest reason, entrusted with logic and scientific knowledge, is not detached from everything that constructs the subject who reasons, nor is the subject separate from other subjects, or from the plants that carries or feed her or him, or from the water the subject drinks and is. As rational and emotional beings, logical and affective, creative, linear and curvilinear, humans should be educated to and through all of their relations, internal ones, with other humans, with other beings. Life is not compartmentalized as desired by the order that compartmentalizes knowledge. To educate is to be guided by the winds. The modern foundations, reflected point to point in the educational process, express a contradiction in terms with ecological education, if nature is essentially relational, intrinsically intelligent and sensitive. In this case, fragmentation and objectivity do not resonate. Moreover, an epistemological setting aimed at domination cannot encompass an education focused on integration, love, and care. A different way to conceive knowledge, not to dominate, but to be better mixed, requires contact, an integrated look, a sincere listening. Pedagogies for this sort of knowledge should permeate and sue the multiplicities that build subjectivity through connections and not by separation, and through involvement, not distancing. Dogmatic precepts keep us tied to the older theories, to traditional methods, obstructing the search for new ways to think, to feel, and to teach. The education established in our institutions is pregnant of the future. It can give continuity to the Enlightenment project through conventional schooling and education, causing directly or indirectly the ecologically unsustainable effects of modernity, or it may be remodeled, transforming relationships in every instance, relations among fields and means of knowledge, pedagogical relations, relations within nature. My goal is to propose new ways of experiencing the process of teaching and learning that depart from the technical and castrating habits of the last centuries, and that will enable, among other things, to touch students in regard to living a balanced life within the world, with people and with nature. There exists already a diversity of alternatives to the conventional educational model. Developed particularly since the New School movement, from the end of the 19th century to this day, alternative educational grounds are fertile for alternative ways of knowing and experiencing life. Democratic and libertarian models center on the students and their interests. Pupils are given space to exercise their autonomy and curiosity toward knowledge and personal growth, while integrating different spheres of life: intellectual, physical, sensitive, moral, etc. The equivalence of voices and the respectability of differences are intrinsic principles in such educational systems, which organize in a way that implies and manifests those principles in practice. Such systems operate in the immediate, educating by example and experience. Célestin Freinet, for instance, in his walking lessons, would take students outdoors for the sake of learning through actual experience and work, in direct contact with the world, with plants, landscapes. Didactic diversification is fundamental for such pedagogical transformation. Nature, arts, work, meditation, the body, field trips, games, and various other tools allow to contemplate multiple intelligences, to access different forms of students' involvement, and to produce different kinds of knowledge. These tools widen the range of relations when integrating mind, senses, and action, students and peers, the group and larger ecologies. Different dynamics reflect situations and processes that do not necessarily match the world of discourse, but trespass the interactions that take place. Among the possibilities, games offer advantages both to individual understanding and reflection, and to the building of collective bonds and values. In games, a group interacts in a relaxed way, deepening and consolidating their connections, and developing group qualities as responsibility, communication, cooperation, mutuality, compromise, affection, initiative, collective meaning attribution, in addition to the joint exercise of creativity and imagination. Plato said you can learn more about a person playing for an hour than talking for a year. Games reveal the characteristics and potentials of each group member in different fields. They open a common space for experimentation and offer a pleasant way to approach serious topics. Games can vary in form, content, complexity. The goal may be reflected in the covered content, as well as it may be intrinsic to the form of the game, for example in cooperative or creative tasks. Adaptations of the same game can be developed for different ages, from children to adults. The educational use of a game may depend not only on the participation, but also, or more, on the interpretation attributed to it afterwards. It is usually indispensable to end it with a moment of conversation for a collective construction of meaning derived from the experience. At this moment, the teacher's look, as an external element and holder of experience and knowledge, may help direct the reflection. Next, I will demonstrate some of my experiences with the use of unconventional methodologies related to the theme of ecological justice, in defense of games and of nature. I participated for 7 years as a monitor in a youth movement of non-formal education linked to the Jewish community, in which children aged 4 to 15 are educated by young people aged 16 to 21. Non-formal education takes place out of official institutions, but it is systematized and oriented to defined pedagogical goals. The activities of the group I was part of consist of playing for educational purposes, guided by collectivist, communitarian, and ecological values. I have later utilized similar dynamics for teaching sociology in high school and for debates in the university. I will describe 2 activities I have developed and realized in the past in collaboration with other educators in the youth movement. The first is the hot potato planet, a variation of the traditional hot potato. The basic operation is the same. A ball passes from hand to the sound of the mantra. However, instead of hot potato pie, it goes hot potato planet, and instead of a simple ball, it is a ball made of layers of wrapped newspaper. Between one layer and the other, there is a paper with a phrase or question and a seed. When the ball stops and burns the one holding it, he or she should read the sentence or question out loud and keep the seed. The sentences raise questions or reflections related to the situation of society and nature and the ways we live, to be discussed afterwards. How is our way of life integrated to the world around us? Is the human being separated from nature? Is it superior to it? Is it part of it? Reciprocal contact with nature. Life without excesses. What is the advantage of destroying the ecosystem in which we live? What impacts do greed and competitiveness have? Nature is a source of wisdom. How will we explain the situation of the planet to the next generation? If all people decided to change the situation together, would it be difficult to do so? At the end, when all the layers of the ball have been undone, the conversation is opened on the topics raised. Finally, the seeds can be sown in a designated ground or taken to be sown at home. This game may instigate a rethinking of current lifestyles and of the possibility of change, connecting the question about society to considerations of personal experience. It is an example of how a simple mechanism can facilitate reflections, through involving people in active playing and thinking. When students are subject to expository speeches, as in conventional classrooms, it is common that they do not show interest, or even that they resist simply to defend their right for disinterest. A game is a way to have them involved in the topic, reflecting on their points of view while having fun. This way, the topic emerges in a light and relaxed manner, landing softly into the group. This dynamic is suitable for all ages and can be adapted to different subjects. The second game is oriented to children and its execution is a little more complex, more easily performed by a group of monitors. I executed it with 3 more people for a group of around 25 11 years old children. It is a farmville experience based on the virtual game. The goal is to fictitiously develop the activities of a farm by non-ecological means for profit. It can be contextualized with the story that the children went on a trip to stay to the farm of the grandfather of one of them, and fascinated with life in the field, they decided to stay and join the business of paper production. The dynamic starts with an all for money moment, where children can creatively negotiate with the monitors to accumulate initial capital in the fake currency of the game. Once they have it, each child should buy a land, which is a styrofoam plate, and 3 seeds. Each seed planted in the field takes 5 minutes to grow. When it becomes a tree, the child must hire tree cutting and paper making services. After manufacturing paper, they should sell it to a stationery and start the process over. Aggravating factors such as more expensive seeds and new means of production can be introduced during the course of the game. Although the game seems deeply immoral and dedicated to the most anti-ecological capitalist formation, the post-game discussion is fundamental to guide reflections and determine its meaning. In my experience, the children enter the real capitalist trance, hurrying ecstatically from task to task, with eyes shining for financial accumulation, doubly stimulated by my tycoon character. By the end of the game, they were hallucinated by the amounts of money they had, As we sat in circle to talk, I started the conversation still with the tycoon incorporated, asking energetically how much money they had and who had the most. Then, letting go of the tycoon, I asked what they intended to do with that money. At that moment, the group realized, in a slight shock, becoming suddenly silent and confused, that there was no use for the money they had, and that they had been running after nothing, without having questioned themselves about it. From this point, we began a discussion about money, labor, consumption, necessity, excess, the limits of accumulation, the ecological costs of unrestricted accumulation, the need for thinking about our ideals and habits. After the activity was over, one boy withdrew from the group to sit on a bench on his own, seeming lost. I approached him and asked if he was okay, and he told me he had never questioned himself about money that way before, and that he needed to think. The active principle is direct experience, as in real-life ones. In this regard, going to real farms or factories, or visiting natural reserves or rescued animals, and actively doing something in these places may produce a similar discussion setting. Direct experience arises a meaningful context for learning and induces personal implication on the topic. A game or dynamic can produce simulated realities to generate this sort of involvement, and possibly produce an even more intense feeling. A fictional, caricatured extreme of something that is a daily reality allows to conduce people through a concrete, affective, and emotional process that leads into deep thought about such patterns. A different yet kind of games is that in which people are engaged in tasks that in themselves imply the development of values and behaviors necessary for an ecological shift, such as teamwork, trust, observation, empathy, creativity, and so on. There might be a contextualization for the tasks. For children, it may be that the world is about to end and their accomplishment of tasks will free a group of people that has found a set of solutions. For adults, it can be simply playing and reflecting on it afterwards. Activities such as building a human pyramid, holding and moving someone with stiff body from arm to arm in a circle formed by people around him or her, walking and exploring the space in pairs where one has the eyes closed and is guided by the partner, etc. Tasks for children, also for adults, could be more inventive and audacious. For instance, saving the apple. You say that in the core of the apple there is a seed essential to humankind, but being the last on earth, this apple should be treated with extreme care. That is why it hangs on a string and it must be beaten without touching hands on it until obtaining the seeds. To achieve that, two people need to collaborate, biting at the same time. In this sort of playing, a group needs to incorporate forms of relationship that require cooperation and favor coexistence. At the same time, these activities are entertaining and open ways for theoretical and political discussions. The games and dynamics I described are a demonstration of how deep and complex subjects, such as ecological justice, can enter the educational process in a variety of ways. Contrasting with the rigid methods of modern education, alternatives can work in manners closer to people's experience and to nature. Games escape the modern/colonial paradigm, the monopoly of reason, the monopoly of rational linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences, and they open doors to access knowledge with autonomy, creativity, and rejoicing. Often people get involved with the theme so naturally that they only notice having learned something, developed new perspectives, or transformed their ways after the end of the activity, minutes or years later. It's my case. I'm still getting insights from my childhood. Thank you for your attention.